The night was quiet, save for the distant wail of sirens echoing through the city. Inside the dimly lit hospital, nurses moved swiftly, attending to patients, their hushed voices blending into the hum of machines. It was just another ordinary shift until the doors to the emergency room burst open. A collective gasp rippled through the waiting area as all eyes turned toward the entrance. Standing there, panting heavily, was a large German shepherd, its fur speckled with dirt and its eyes filled with desperation. Clutched gently in its strong jaws was a baby, wrapped in a thin, tattered blanket. The room froze. Doctors, nurses, and patients alike stared in shock, their minds struggling to process the sight before them. Who was this dog? And more importantly, where had it found this baby? Stay connected, like, comment, and share. Follow and support my channel for more interesting, heartwarming stories. Let's begin. For a moment, no one moved. The German shepherd stood at the hospital entrance, its chest rising and falling with rapid breaths, as if it had run for miles. The baby in its jaws whimpered softly, barely audible over the stunned silence of the emergency room. Then instinct took over. A nurse rushed forward, her hands trembling as she carefully reached for the child. The dog hesitated for a brief second, its deep brown eyes filled with protectiveness. It wasn't just a random stray, there was intelligence in its gaze, a fierce determination that suggested this baby's safety was its sole mission. "It's okay," the nurse whispered soothingly. "We'll take care of the baby." Finally, as if understanding, the German shepherd gently released the tiny bundle into the nurse's arms. The baby let out a weak cry, and that single sound sent the medical staff into motion. "Get a pediatrician, now," one of the doctors shouted as they rushed the infant to a nearby examination table. The dog let out a low whine and stepped forward, but security guards hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. It was a massive dog, well-built, muscular, and clearly trained. The blue collar around its neck, worn and slightly frayed, bore a single inscription, Max. The name rang familiar to one of the doctors, Dr. Harrison, an ex-military medic who had worked with K9 units before. He knelt down, making slow, non-threatening movements. "Max, is that your name, buddy?" he asked gently. Max's ears perked up and he let out a small whimper, his body tense as he watched the nurses tend to the baby. His paws were dirty, and there was a small cut on his front leg, suggesting he had traveled far, possibly through rough terrain. Dr. Harrison glanced at the nurse holding the baby. "How's the infant?" "Severely dehydrated. Underweight, but alive," she replied. "We need to get fluids into the little one immediately." The urgency in her voice made Max whimper again. He took a few steps closer, his nails clicking against the cold hospital floor, his eyes never leaving the fragile bundle in the nurse's arms. That's when Dr. Harrison noticed something. Max wasn't just concerned. He was waiting. "Someone go check outside," the doctor instructed. "This dog came from somewhere, and I don't think he was alone." A few nurses hurried outside, scanning the darkened streets. Max stood by the doorway, his tail stiff, his ears swiveling anxiously. Then, just as they were about to give up, a weak, raspy voice called out, "Please, help." The nurses turned toward a nearby alley barely visible from the hospital entrance. There, slumped against the cold brick wall, was a woman, her clothes tattered, her face pale, and her eyes filled with desperation. She had been watching. Max let out a bark, then another, before bolting toward her. His tail wagged wildly as he pressed himself against her, his body vibrating with relief. "Oh my God," one of the nurses gasped. "It's the baby's mother." Max hadn't just brought the baby to safety. He had come back for her too. The nurses rushed toward the woman, their eyes wide with shock. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and her hands trembling as she reached for Max, who nuzzled against her, whining softly. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" one of the nurses asked, kneeling beside her. The woman tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "Am my baby? Is my baby okay?" One of the nurses exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Harrison before nodding reassuringly. "Your baby is safe. We're taking care of them inside." A weak sob escaped her lips, and for the first time relief flickered across her tired face. She tried to stand, but her body gave out and she collapsed against Max, who stayed perfectly still, letting her lean against him as if he understood she had no strength left. "We need a stretcher out here," a nurse called out. As they carefully lifted her, she let out a small, pained cry. It was then that they noticed the bruises, deep, dark marks covering her wrists and arms. The tattered sleeves of her shirt barely concealed the evidence of past suffering. Dr. Harrison's expression darkened. "She's been through hell." Max stayed close as they wheeled her inside, his paws barely leaving the ground as he followed, his eyes never straying from the woman. He had done his job, he had brought her and the baby to safety. But there was something else in his eyes, something more than just loyalty. He was guarding her. Inside the hospital, the woman was placed in a bed and 4 drip inserted into her frail arm. Despite her exhaustion, her first words were still about her child. "Please, I need to see my baby." The nurses hesitated, but after a quick check with the pediatrician, they carefully brought the tiny bundle over, wrapped in a soft hospital blanket. The woman's entire body trembled as she reached out, cradling her baby close. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "You're safe, my angel, you're safe." Max, sitting patiently beside her bed, let out a low, contented sigh. Dr. Harrison pulled up a chair beside her. "Can you tell us what happened?" The woman swallowed hard. Her eyes flickered with hesitation, but then she looked at Max, at the unwavering trust in his gaze, and she took a deep breath. "My name is Rachel," she started. "And if it weren't for Max, I don't think my baby or I would be alive right now." The room fell into silence as she began to speak. Rachel had been on the run. She had fled an abusive relationship, carrying nothing but a small bag and the child growing inside her. For months, she had moved from place to place, staying in shelters when she could, hiding in abandoned buildings when she couldn't. She had met Max when she was at her lowest, barely able to walk, hunger gnawing at her insides. He had been astray then, wandering the streets, scavenging for food just like her. But something about him had drawn her in, the intelligence in his eyes, the gentleness in his approach. He had followed her that night, keeping his distance at first, but always nearby. She hadn't realized it at the time, but Max had chosen her. And when the time came, when she gave birth alone in a freezing, abandoned warehouse, Max had been the one to stay by her side, keeping her warm, watching over her. But things had taken a dark turn when her past caught up with her. Tears welled up in her eyes. He found us," she whispered. "The man I ran from, he found us." Max let out a low growl, his ears flattening against his head. Rachel's hands tightened around her baby as she continued. Her ex had shown up furious, demanding she come back, threatening to take the baby. She had fought, she had screamed, but she had been too weak. And that was when Max had stepped in. He saved us, she said, stroking the dog's head. When I thought it was over, he attacked him. He fought so hard, her voice broke. Max bought us time. He let me run. Dr. Harrison sat back, exhaling deeply. It all made sense now. The bruises, the exhaustion, Max's determination to protect both of them. Rachel had risked everything for her baby, and Max had risked everything for them. The doctor nodded. You're safe now, Rachel. Both of you. No one is going to hurt you here. Max let out a soft sigh and rested his head on the bed. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He was family. Rachel couldn't hold back the sobs racking her body as she hugged her baby close. The warmth of her child's tiny body against her chest was the only thing grounding her in this moment. But through the haze of exhaustion, fear still lingered. What if he found them again? As if sensing her distress, Max nudged her hand with his nose, his brown eyes filled with unwavering reassurance. He had fought for her once. He would do it again. Dr. Harrison, who had been silently observing, stood up. Rachel, I know you've been through a lot, but I need to ask, do you want us to alert the authorities? Rachel hesitated. The thought of reliving everything in front of strangers, of exposing herself and her baby to more danger, sent a shiver down her spine. But then she looked at Max. If he had been brave enough to stand up for her, couldn't she do the same for herself? She inhaled shakily and nodded. Yes. I want to make sure he can't hurt us again. Dr. Harrison gave a firm nod before stepping out of the room to make the call. Rachel felt Max shift beside her, his heavy body pressing against the bed. He wasn't going anywhere. A nurse walked in shortly after, carrying a fresh set of clothes and a warm meal. You're safe now, she said softly, handing Rachel the bundle. Take your time. Rachel reached for the food, but the moment she took her first bite, she felt the full weight of her exhaustion crashing down on her. She hadn't eaten a real meal in days, and her body, though weary, was desperate to recover. Max laid his head on her lap, his breathing steady and rhythmic. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Hours passed, and Rachel finally drifted into a deep sleep, her baby nestled securely beside her. Max never moved from his spot. Even when a gentle knock at the door signaled the arrival of the police, he remained alert. Detective Simmons, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a sharp gaze, stepped inside. Miss Rachel. Rachel stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. I know this is difficult, he continued, but I need you to tell me everything you remember. We want to help you and make sure this man never finds you again. Rachel swallowed hard and nodded. With Max at her feet and her baby in her arms, she told them everything. Every terrifying night. Every bruise. Every moment of fear. Detective Simmons listened patiently, taking notes, occasionally glancing at Max. When Rachel finished, he let out a slow breath. This dog saved your life, he said with admiration. We're going to do everything we can to make sure you never have to run again. Rachel gripped the edge of her blanket. What if he comes looking for me? The detective's expression hardened. He won't get the chance. We already have a patrol checking the area, and if he so much as tries to contact you, he'll be arrested. Rachel exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety washing over her. Then Detective Simmons smiled. And as for Max, he crouched down, scratching behind the dog's ears. I don't think you could ask for a better protector. Rachel looked at Max, her eyes brimming with gratitude. He wasn't just a stray. He wasn't just a hero. He was family. Days passed and Rachel's strength slowly returned. The hospital had arranged for her to stay in a secure shelter while authorities handled the case against her ex. But there was one lingering question. Where will Max go? She asked Dr. Harrison, fear tightening in her chest. He doesn't have an owner, the doctor admitted. But there are adoption programs. No, Rachel shook her head firmly. I want to keep him. Dr. Harrison smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. The day Rachel and her baby were finally discharged, Max walked beside her, his head held high. They weren't just leaving the hospital. They were starting a new life. Rachel looked down at him, feeling tears sting her eyes. Thank you, Max. The German shepherd wagged his tail, pressing his body against her leg. He had been abandoned, just like her. But now they had each other. A canine retired from duty, but never from loyalty. If this story touched your heart, what part moved you the most? Let me know in the comments.